In today's live workshop, we are going to be learning how to wire perhaps one of the most popular motors to animate your animatronics and motorize those static props. And that is the common car windshield wiper motor. I imagine a lot of you guys watching have a static prop that's like, really cool, but maybe it would be a little bit cooler if it was like a zombie that can kind of crawl at you, a little ghost behind a tomb that can kind of peer up and then hide, and then peer up and hide. So wiper motors are great at creating continuous motion. It can be a creepy rocking chair with a creepier doll on it that just rocks, and looks at you. And I'm sorry, but I'm not trick-or-treating at that house. I don't trick-or-treat at no creepy doll house. So, If you're a beginner and this is your first time, the first thing I look for is boom, the fact that the motor has a arm on it. Now, not all of them do. So if you look here, it's got the shaft and it's got a bolt that bolts down our little arm here. And so it's kind of convenient to already have the arm. It is not 100% necessary. You can make your own arm. This control arm, or, this arm here is rather short. Say you're trying to make a witch with a cauldron. You're going to need a bigger arm, so you can replace this arm with something bigger. Like this is way too big. But always keep in mind that the longer the arm, the less torque it's going to have. On our wiper motor here, the arms tend to be short because the closer you are to the center of rotation, the more torque this thing is going to generate. And these are super popular for that very reason. It's for the amount of torque you get in a very inexpensive package. It comes with this funky ball attachment that honestly, I have never found a way to figure out how to use this thing. So I drill it out. I usually drill from the back side because see how thin that is? And so you can drill this out and pop it off. And then you'll have a hole where you can bolt this to your different linkages. Most arms will have kind of an incline. See, it kind of ramps up. And the reason for that is, you got to mount this thing, right? So you can see I have two mounting holes. And this one's kind of unique in that there's a mounting hole for the housing right here. Now, normally, most of them don't have this. And that's why I got this one. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And if you turn it around, you can see that the mounting areas here are all, flush with each other. So I can just mount this with a piece of wood here or a metal bracket or something like that. And the incline is such that when you put a bolt head here and a bolt head here, this can still spin. And imagine you're going to have a bolt going through here to bolt to your linkage for your motorized prop. The two bolt heads are not going to knock together as this thing spins around. So you can create, of course, your own little incline with your aluminum flat bar. The other thing I look for is that it's got an accessible wiring harness. My wires come out of the motor all from the same place. And then we have one wire branch off kind of like by itself, but then it joins the others, back into this black loom, and it all ends in a connector. Mine happens to be a female connector. Now it depends. Yours might end at a male connector. I have two options. I can try and buy the male counterpart to this, so that way I can plug it in, or I can just cut this thing off and then have access to all the wires. Totally up to you. Listen, they all function the same way. There's no one better wiper motor than the other wiper motor. They wipe the windshield. That's just pretty much what they do. But there's a couple design elements that we've already gone through that make your life a little easier. Now, some of them have absolutely no exterior wires with which to speak of. So how are you supposed to wire this thing? Here's just like a sample connector. And you can see that it's got spades inside, spades connectors. They look like little swords, and I have 5 of them here. So oftentimes, pretend that this isn't here. This will be kind of like stuck to the body somewhere like this, and there'll be absolutely no wires. And this is the only way you'll be able to wire him. Now, for testing purposes, you can always use alligator clips to go in here and connect each of these little spades and try and figure out what they do, but after that, you want to be able to make more permanent connections. And one way to do that is to either purchase the female end of this, or make your own spade connectors. So for instance, here is a female end. And so if I had this guy like this, you purchase the female end, it's got the little wires for you, and you are pretty much good to go. You know, you can just connect it like that, and you have a place to hook up all your wires to. But I try not to purchase the ones that are like this because they kind of require that extra step. If you look inside your male connector, you'll typically see a bunch of these. And the matching one looks like this. If you look inside, that's the female version. And so they connect. All you have to do is stick a wire in there, and you can see that there is a little hole for a wire. Poke a wire in there like that. And let me take this off. So the wire is sitting in the middle here. And most basic wire strippers will have a crimping area here at the bottom. So all you have to do is stick it in one of the grooves and crimp it down. And what that's going to do is pinch that wire in here so the wire can't get out. And you have a way to connect to the individual spade connectors of your windshield wiper motor connector. Luckily, we don't have this problem because for this time only, I had some foresight, and that is like super rare. Like this never happens. So screenshot this moment. Foresight moment. I have 5 wires coming out. You're going to find these have like anywhere from 3 to 5 wires is usually the most common ones. One is not better than the other. I kind of prefer the 5-wire ones for whatever reason. I find them a little bit easier to wire up. I always try and identify the ground first, you know, and by convention, it's usually black, but not always. Like these windshield wiper motor manufacturers have to get it together because my 5 colors, you might have the exact colors, but they do something totally different, you know, or you might have 5 completely different colors than mine. There is like no convention. So that's kind of annoying, but hopefully you can follow the same process that I'm going to do, and you can figure out what is what. Here's a black wire. So this is highly suspect that this is the ground. But what makes it even more suspect is the fact that it branches off and it is connected directly to the metallic portion of the body. Because in a car, the way you ground a lot of the components is by actually bolting it to something metal, either the metal chassis of your car or another metal component. I can either decide to cut this off now or not. I tend to be very non-committal in the beginning. Like, you got to prove yourself to me. I try and leave it intact until I'm sure that it is worthy of one of my projects, which, you know, it's like you shop at the dollar store for your projects. Like, I'm worthy, lady. I'm worthy. Okay. Your car is run from a 12-volt battery. So automatically, you know, you need a 12-volt power adapter. All right, so we got that. Well, how many amps? Now, we can sit here and do some calculations based on the weight you're trying to move. No. You pretty much can't go wrong with a 12-volt, 5-amp power supply. Now, you never want to go above the voltage that it requires, but varying the volts will actually affect the speed. So if you use something with a smaller voltage or lower voltage, it'll actually turn slower. You know, whereas the amps you provide affects the torque. So say you already know that you have to move a pretty heavy load. You definitely are not going to want to go with a 3-amp. So 5-amp minimum, but just for good measure, I go with the 8-amp. It is 12 volts with 8 amps. So we have plenty to mess with. And mine came with this little female adapter. And if yours doesn't, I highly recommend getting one. Because otherwise, if you don't pick up a female adapter to be able to plug this in, well, there's no way to plug this into your wiper motor. What you're going to have to do is cut it. And once you cut it, it's fine, you know, go ahead and wire it up. But once Halloween is done, heck, I want to be able to use this for something else. And it's so convenient to just like unplug, plug it into something else, plug it in. When you have the wires, now you're like electrical taping things, you're wire nutting things. So, you know, I like to try and keep my power supplies intact whenever possible. It's got a positive and a negative here. So I've already put, you know, traditionally black for negative and red for positive. So let's connect the negative to what we suspect is the negative. So you can see that the black wire goes up here, which would correspond to that little pin up there. So I'm just going to insert this in here. Now, these breadboard jumper wires, not a great idea to run long term. This is just for, let's figure out what wire does what. All right. So then I see that we have a red wire here. Well, that's gotta be power, people. Done and done. We already figured this out. So the red goes into this pin. So I'm just going to stick this in here, and you can see it matches up with where the red is coming in. So, all right, guys. So we already figured this out. This took like no time. Come on now. So what's going on here? So this is where we start the process of elimination, because I am pretty darn sure that the black is ground, given the way it's hooked up here. So let's start going one by one and always disconnect from power. Even if I unplug this, notice that it's still charged. So there's always a charge here. So it's really important. I always like to unplug from this end, because if you're working on your motor, especially when it's got linkages in it, this has got way more torque than your hands. So your hands are going to get, pinched. In a best case scenario, your hands are going to get pinched. So now you can see it's completely off. So here's a little white one over here. Let's see if he does anything. And the nice thing with wiper motors is that they are robust. Like, it is very tough to kill them. They are like zombies of the motor world. Okay, so white does nothing. So far in our testing, white and red do nothing. They are useless. So let's continue here. Let's do green. Green for go. Let's see what happens. So let's do green. All right, guys, it's turning, and it is turning clockwise. So we have 2 of the 5 wires figured out. So let's go to the yellow now, which is our final wire. All right, so it's spinning faster. So now we have figured out that our yellow is our high speed and our green is our low speed. All right, so we have 3 of the 5 wires figured out. That means all we have left to figure out is the red and the white, which means that they are probably part of the park feature, which we're going to get into a little more detail, later on. But if you think about it, when you turn off your car or you turn the windshield wiper off, it just doesn't stop like wherever it was. It returns to a reset position, usually like at the bottom of your windshield. So that way you don't get trying to look. By default, by plugging in ground to negative and one of the speed wires to the positive, it turns in a clockwise direction. Now, say you don't want that. You need to turn it the other way. All you have to do is reverse the positive and the negative. It doesn't hurt the motor at all. It just reverses the direction. It's a simple way to do it. And see, now you see that it is turning counterclockwise. A lot of times what you're going to find is it's like, great, you got 2 speeds to choose from. But very rarely will any of these speeds be like perfect. Oftentimes it'll be fast. Like if you need to do like a witch's cauldron, you don't want her like stirring her pot so much that the soup is like flying all over the place. A zombie kind of like peeking up over a tombstone, but he's peeking up so fast. He's like, hey guys. It's like, whoa, that zombie like totally ate some coffee infused brains. So if you need things to move at a very specific rate, well, how do you do that? Well, there's 2 ways to do that. One of the ways is to vary the voltage. This is a 3 amp, so not 5 amp, 3 amp, but you can choose different voltages. Let's see what happens if I set it to 6 volts. That's the high speed. Look at how fast it's moving. It's, one could maybe say it's moving half as fast as what it was. This is 3 amps. Because there is absolutely no load, the torque is still pretty good. Like I'm having a tough time stopping this with my hand, but you can see I can definitely slow it down. Let's see what happens when we turn it down to 3 amps. Not 3 amps, but 3 volts with 3 amps. So 3 amps is not enough to even turn this thing. It takes a little trial and error before you figure out like what voltage just kind of gives you the right stirring or the right peeping or the right kind of creepy rocking. You can pick up a motor speed controller. It's got 4 screw terminals right there, making hookup super easy, no soldering required. It's got a little knob here that turns. And if you want to get super fancy, there's even a little knob that you can put onto it. You turn it around in the back, you see power plus, power ground, motor plus, and motor negative. So let's try hooking this up and see what happens. Now, when I use a motor speed controller, I usually use the high speed wire because you get, a wider range of speeds to choose from. It'll be enough to kind of hold this for demo purposes. Okay, and then power negative. So let's put the negative in here. And again, if you reverse it, no issues. It'll just spin the other way. This is motor positive, which means what control wire we want. So let's take the yellow, put the yellow one in here. Motor negative to the negative here. It's not turning. Now, probably because this is turned all the way. So there we go. Now I have it going real slow and I'm going to ramp it up. And that is the high speed. And then I'm going to turn it, ramp it down. So with a motor speed controller, super easy, no soldering involved, you can pick a very custom speed. You know your high speed, your low speed, and your ground. So the other 2 wires, even if you don't know what they do, you're ready to motorize your prop. Done. And now you know how to use a motor controller to get that custom speed, to get like that movement that looks just right and super believable. I'm not going to feel good if I don't know what the other 2 wires do. I am like super curious. So let's see if we can find out what they do. We know that they have something to do with the park feature. So I'm going to go with convention again. And because I have a red wire, and for you, it may not be the red wire, or you may not have a red wire, but I'm going to guess that this goes to a power source. Perhaps a battery or an ignition source. Because if you just pull power to the motor, how is it going to have power to go down? So it's going to have to be powered somehow. So I'm going to guess that that is power. And the white one is our park feature. One way we can try and find what it is with our multimeter. If you have a multimeter, set him up into continuity mode. The red is plugged into the yellow for high speed and ground is ground. So let's get him moving. So now what I'm going to do with limited hands is stick this where the white is, which is like right there. And I'm going to try and hold him like thusly. And with the other one, I'm going to touch the housing. You guys hear that? There's a momentary beep that you hear, and it looks like it's happening when the arm is right here. It goes beep, turns, beep, turns. So at that moment, you are getting contact. You're getting continuity. So that tells me that the red is indeed the power, and the white one is for our park feature. And together, used together, they'll create our park feature. Why would you even use your park feature? Perhaps you want your zombie to go back down underneath the tombstone so he's ready to reset and start again. Or perhaps you have this hooked up to a 555 timer where it lowers a spider for 3 seconds, lights and sound, and scares everybody. And then it rolls the spider back up and then puts it into a park position. So the spider always starts at the same point. Our ground goes to ground. In a single pole double throw switch, there's on, and on, like this one. Put the power in here and then grab the yellow. Put him in here. Right? Now, in order for the park feature to be activated, the control wire, whether high or low speed, must make contact with the white. So why don't we put the white in here, and the white goes from here, And we're going to put him in here. The yellow never goes to the power. So in order for it to get power, I have to flip the switch in this position, thus connecting the yellow with the red that goes into power. So the yellow will be able to do its thing, because before we were connecting the yellow directly into the positive here. So the motor's going to run. When I go like this, the motor's going to stop. And it's going to stop at whatever position it's in. And then when we connect the yellow and the white, it should put itself in the perk position. So let's see, in theory, if that works. When I plug it in, theoretically, nothing should happen, except maybe blow up. All right. So when I push it forward and I make contact with the red, it should start turning. All right, cool. All right. So note where it is right now. Let's see what happens. Big bunch of nothing. Oh, I don't have the red connected here. My mistake. So the red, right now I have a red coming into here, but I have no red coming into here. I'm going to disconnect this here. So we have to take this red right here, not just the red from our power. Go like that. All right, it's a little tough to follow, but we have the ground coming from the wiring harness going into the negative. So that's the easy part. Then we have our yellow, instead of going into here, he's going to sit in here. And then we have the red, our constant power coming, because the motor is going to need, power to have enough power to put him into park. So we don't want to just cut power to him. So from the red, he's coming in here, where he is also touching the red of the power. So it can power it. And we're also feeding it into here. So that way the yellow can be powered. So let's see this situation here. Nothing should be happening because this is just up like this. And so let's connect it to the red. It does its thing. Now I'm going to stop it randomly. And then let's see what happens. All right. So let's remember that it parked itself just to the right of that mounting hole there. So let's try again. And then park. All right, so it keeps parking in the same spot. And this is pretty cool because let's say for your prop, that park position doesn't work. Super easy. All you have to do is back off this bolt or this nut here, reposition the arm to what will work, and then bolt it back down again, and it'll always park in that position for you. So not the best way to do the park. It'd be nice to have it move and then immediately park, instead of, but it's the type of switch I have. Alternatively, we can just try doing this. Perhaps we're going to fake an on single pole double throw situation right here. This little guy's please don't start faking things. This is where the stream was going so well, and now you have to experiment with this. The motor's oh, I know what's going to happen. I'm not going to make it into any prop is what's going to happen. All right, so let's turn this on. All right, now it's working in this position because both wires are tied together. So what happens when I park it? Seamless. Takes a little time, gotta think about it. And then, there we go. So it'll always park itself when I pull it. Not the best way to kind of run the park feature. So beyond this, with a wiper motor, you set your speed, something that works. But what if you want to animate the speed? Maybe it can be that creepy doll on the rocking chair where it's rocking real slow and then it starts to rock fast. And you can combine this with sounds and lights and stuff, and then it starts to rock slow. It's kind of tough to convince somebody to sit there all night with the motor controller, just doing this. You would have to buy a mini packs of beers, if it's your friends. But you can actually buy a programmer where you can plug everything in, a lot like we have here, and no code is necessary. You use a series of buttons to program your animation. And a lot of them even support the park feature. It'll memorize that program. So you just hit the on button and it'll do that animation over and over again for you. And so a lot of them will program maybe up to a minute, maybe a little bit more of an animation. And that may be enough for your prop. Other than that, well, we are going to go the coding route. It's actually pretty simple to do. Even if you're not sure, you can always take my code and just upload it and use it as is, and then you'll start to learn how to make your own modifications. So what we're going to be doing next with this is actually programming our own movements. And then after that, we can explore some ways to mount this in different linkage ideas. You can create so many spatially different movement with something that just turns. You would be surprised. It's not just like turning round and round exorcist style. So it all depends on how creative you get with your linkages. We've done it. We figured out what every single wire on this thing does, and we didn't blow it up, which is like the big success of the night, but also kind of like a little bit of a disappointment. So I may have to bring a smoke machine in here and just kind of like pump in like fake smoke or something like that. So we get that satisfaction, that we blew something up. Guys, as you know, this was shot live. So of course, there's always stuff that I go back and I'm like, oh, I totally forgot to talk about this or that. So hit the link below for the full tutorial. That's where I include everything that I completely forgot to mention this time, but hopefully I got all the highlights. I answered all your questions. And if I didn't, definitely post in the comments below. For community members, you can watch all of these workshops live, as well as our community build where we build animatronics from start to finish. And this is done via Zoom. So we can interact in real time, ask questions. Heck, show me what you're working on. Most of the time, I like what you guys are working on way better than I'm working on. So until next time, guys, see ya!